Dr. Engelman was expecting to do this lecture. This is actually her lecture that she wrote. I know it has my name up there right now, but she's actually the one who prepared the lecture, so I definitely want to give credit where credit is due, and I'm going to do my best to do her lecture service for you guys. And you know, potty training is one of those things that, you know, for the most part as pediatricians these days, we all kind of come from a very similar approach, but if you ask 50 different pediatricians, you're probably going to get 50 different, slightly different answers, okay? So I'm also going to kind of throw in there a little bit of my own take on things, both from my experience, but also having just potty trained a very stubborn 3-year-old young man in my own house, which was super fun, yes. So finally successful, but definitely took some effort and frankly took some help too. So I'll kind of touch on some of just my personal experience with my own son, but then also of course my patients too. And I am going to try to go through the slides actually fairly quickly because I have a feeling we're probably going to have a lot of questions, and I want to certainly make sure that we're respectful of everybody's time, but that you get plenty of time to ask those questions, and the folks watching at home, same thing. So definitely let me know if you need me to slow down. I don't think you will need me to speak louder. If you need me to speak quieter, do please let me know. Okay, so mastering potty training, or at least desperately trying to. Little introduction, kind of how we're going to go through is give you a little bit of history on potty training, and then we're going to go kind of stepwise. You know, first step is really assessing the child's readiness, and frankly your readiness too, to start potty training. How you get started, what to do when certain problems occur, what to do about nighttime stuff, and then leave time for questions, okay? So first of all, you know, mastering potty training is it's an important step. For the child, definitely, it's a developmental step, but also for parents, it's kind of one of those milestones that we're no longer a baby anymore. We're finally moving into true kidhood, if you will. And for the kid, you know, first of all, they're kind of discovering their physical ability, the fact that they can actually do these things. They can dress themselves, they can get up on the potty, they can control their bladder and bowel. There's also an issue of the relationship dynamics there. Not only us starting to understand the relationship with our child and how that's growing, but also the child starting to have really more of an active role in that relationship and defining it. And then they're also learning how to react to external pressures. So they're having to learn how to deal with the internal sensation of, okay, that's what it feels like when I need to pee, and that's what it feels like when I need to poop, and what do I do about that? But then also the expectation of the parents and of society, and that no, you're not allowed to just go whenever you want in your pants anymore. Okay, and how do they deal with that and move forward with that? And then of course achieving self-esteem, because you know it's definitely an issue. And if you've ever known anybody who's had children who had issues or had difficulty with what we call continence, so controlling their bowel or bladder, that obviously can be a really big deal moving forward. It can cause self-esteem issues and definitely pressure on the family as well. So it can be one of the most difficult developmental phases, I think, because in large part, I think, again, it comes down to the child's readiness as well as the parent's readiness, okay? Your child has to be developmentally at a stage, motor skill-wise, emotionally, socially, but then the parents also have to be ready for this as well. So part of it is that pressure to conform to the parental and social expectations like we were just talking about, the child's need for independence. 2s and 3s. Terrible 2s? It's a lie. The terrible 3s and the terrible 2s and a little bit of the 4s and maybe about 15 months on. Okay, so it can be an issue, right? And it can lead to that power struggle because the child is trying to develop their independence and assert their independence at this point in their life. You know, mommy, I can do it. Mommy, I do it myself. Mommy, I do it myself. I hear that all the time in my house. Mommy, I do it myself. Okay. But then also the parents trying to guide them along in that process, of course. And that struggle can cause anxiety for both parties. It can cause anxiety for the child, but it can definitely also cause anxiety for the parents, especially when you're trying to make sure you're addressing this in a way that's healthy for your child. That negative impact, the anxiety issues, the power struggle, when it starts to get into a negative cycle, it can lead to physical problems. So this is what I was talking about with some of these kids who have had difficulty. Inuresis is the word we use for kids who have difficulty holding onto their urine. So kids who are wetting their pants later than they should. Encoparesis is the term we use for kids who lose stool. Okay, some of that can be an issue. Usually that's from stool retention and holding. So it can be behavioral holding where they purposefully hold their stool and will not go, whether or not it's an issue with they don't want to go outside of the house because it's scary for them. whether it's a power struggle with the parents, but eventually that turns to stool retention, turns to constipation, and then they get stool that actually leaks around the stool that's being retained in the rectum, and they can't control that. They also get expansion of their rectum and their colon such that it's more difficult for them to control it, and it's even more difficult for them to actually sense when they need to go. Okay, and if that's a big enough problem for a long enough period of time, it can really be a challenge to deal with and to correct. It can be corrected, but needless to say, not something you want to get to, right? And then last but not least, of course, in really extreme circumstances, when the parents and the child are just getting completely frustrated and worn out, of course, it can actually lead to child abuse too. So, child-oriented approach. This is the approach that most pediatricians, even if we all kind of give you a little bit different variation on all of this, most of us do go based on the child-oriented approach. So what does that mean? That means first and foremost waiting till your child is actually ready to do this, and that will be at different points for different kids. Originally developed by T. Barry Brazelton, beginning potty training after certain criteria are met. This is huge, okay? You can't just say, okay, I'm going to potty train my kid at 18 months. I'm going to potty train my kid at 2 years. Your kid may not be ready then. And if you try to potty train them then, it's just going to be miserable for everybody involved. It's going to take forever, and it's not going to happen. So physiologic maturation. So they have to be able to have the motor skills required to do this. They have to be able to stand and sit and walk and, maybe get up the little stairs to the potty if they're going on the big potty. They have to be able to not completely dress and undress themselves, but they need to be able to a certain extent, be able to pull down their pants, pull up their pants, or at least help you to do that, okay, and be working towards that process. Behavioral maturation. So they really need to be able to understand some of these things we've already been talking about. Understand and respond to instruction, so simple instructions. They need to have a certain level of independence and be working on that independence, because that's also what's in part going to motivate them to actually want to do this. They have to be imitating you, okay? So those of you who have toddlers or older kids know they get to a certain point where all they want to do is imitate what mommy and daddy do, and they want to do what you do. Well, that's important for a couple of reasons, because one, it's going to be, again, that motivation, that social motivation, because they want to be like mommy and daddy, but they also need to be able to be at a position developmentally where they are imitating, because they're going to learn first and foremost by imitating what you do, okay? And then they have to have a desire to please. Because you will see, there are children who, 2.5 years of age, walk in, hand mommy the diapers, and say, I'm done. I want underwear. Usually girls. And because they're just done, they don't like the sensation, they know they can do it, they're very independent. Those kids are not the norm, okay? So part of it has to be the desire to please. They know this is something you want them to do, and they want you to be pleased with them. And so they need to have that desire. That's part of the motivation, again, to actually move forward. It's important to let your child kind of reach each of these levels as they get to it, okay, and not have a preconceived notion as to when it's going to happen. They need to have the freedom to master each step at their own pace with minimal conflict. Potty training is one of those issues in pediatrics where we tell you the more you fight, the worse it's going to get. Okay, this is not something that you push hard on, okay, for the most part. Obviously, we get to a point at some point in time for some of our kids who are a little bit more challenging, like my son, where you're like, okay, I'm done with the diapers. I know you can do this. We need to move forward. But you have to, for the most part, you need to let your kid kind of come to that as it's developmentally appropriate for them. So, again, the child-oriented approach, for the most part, is associated with very good results. High rate of continence, so being able to control their urine and their stool on their own. Fairly rapid training time. This does not mean 1 day of potty training. Okay, again, yes, those kids are out there who it really just takes 1 day and they're good to go. But most kids are going to take a little bit longer than that. And then also, most importantly, low long-term regression. There are definitely things that are going to cause kids to regress. Stress in the house, a new baby, moving, things like that, and that's very, very normal. But for the most part, there's a low rate of long-term regression. So once they're good, okay, for the most part. Most of our current toilet training recommendations, like I said, are based on this. And again, even if as pediatricians you'll get variations on a theme, but the vast majority of us still base whatever our recommendations are at the core on this approach. So a few interesting facts, and I'll be honest, some of the stuff I didn't know. I knew some of these, but I didn't know all of these until I was looking at Dr. Engelman's lecture and talking to her about it. So in the United States, children achieve daytime continence, meaning they can, during the day, control their bowel and bladder about 26% by 24 months, 85% by 30 months, and 98% by 36 months. But look at Swiss kids. That's a lot of diapers. Okay, so that shows you a little bit how, yes, some of it is obviously developmental and being able to do it developmentally, but a lot of it's cultural too. When is it expected of us? When is it not? There's actually some interesting information too about apparently the average age of potty training was younger when we did cloth diapers as opposed to now disposable diapers. Well, that makes sense on two levels. One, they oftentimes can sense the sensation of wet, and the stooling is more uncomfortable in cloth diapers. But then the other side of that is if you had to wash your child's diapers by hand and hang dry them every day, I think we'd all be a little more motivated to get them potty trained sooner, right? So it's interesting because there's definitely also cultural aspects to this as well. So average overall, if you look at most cultures, is about 30 months of age. Obviously, though, like we said, large individual and cultural variation. In the US, it's apparently, I guess, about 27 months on this one study. The AAP says about 40% of 3-year-olds. So you'll also see the numbers kind of vary some too. So it kind of depends on what population you're using and what study you're looking at. The age range is about 18 months to 3 to 4 years of age. Daytime bladder control typically does precede, so it comes before bowel control, and dry nights are followed well after both. Okay, so even if you get totally good on even controlling poop and pee during the day, it's still going to take them quite a while to get that continence at night. And part of that is an issue of control, and part of that is an issue of bladder size. Okay, as they're actually being able to go that long, have their bladder actually contain that much fluid for that long. Girls do typically complete toilet training before boys. That is not an urban myth, okay? Obviously, exceptions to every rule, but in general, girls do potty train just a few months, though, 2 to 3 months earlier than boys. And the first child does typically take longer, about 2 months longer to potty train. There's all kinds of things you can chalk that up to, whether it's just parental experience, you know, whether it's first child stubbornness. There's various things. But yes, the first child does typically, and I can vouch for that, take longer. Bedwetting. This is always a big question. And like we said, the nighttime continence does typically come after daytime continence. So nighttime bedwetting is very common, even very normal and expected up to easily 4 years of age, but even 5 years of age. It says common up to 6 because a lot of kids will continue to wet, even if most of them have nighttime continence by 4 or 5 years of age. There's still a lot who will continue to bedwet to 6. There's also a group of kids who will obtain nighttime dryness, and then it'll start up again. Okay, and for a lot of these kids, it actually often runs in families. And for some of these kids, there can be behavioral aspects, but for a lot of them, again, it's that bladder size issue. Their body grows faster than their bladder does, and they start nighttime wetting again because their bladder's just not big enough, and it takes them until they're about 10, 11, 12 before their bladder catches up with the rest of their body. But it can be a stressful thing for the kids as well as for the parents. Early training, meaning before 2 years of age in general, and these days we kind of discourage for the most part because it has been associated. You're more likely to have issues with potty training and for the child not to be ready prior to 2 years of age, which means you're going to run into those anxiety issues, those stress issues, have a difficult time not only with the potty training, but actually lead to more of those issues we talked about, such as constipation, the encoparesis, enuresis, behavioral holding, all of those kinds of stuff. And there was a pretty good study that showed that early initiation, really less than 27 months of age, which is just a few months older than 2 years, is really correlated with a longer duration of toilet training as well. And then that longer duration leads to higher stress and less successfulness. Obviously, again, there's exceptions to every rule. If you have a kid who walks in at 2 years of age and hands you their diapers, they're probably gonna be okay, okay? Key factors in success: readiness of the child. I would add to that, readiness of the parent. I probably could have gotten my son potty trained earlier. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to lay down the law. I wasn't ready to frankly give up the diapers, which really you get to realize are quite easy when you don't have to worry that whether or not there's a toilet around and carry, once again, a bunch of extra clothes and all of that. And so I think a lot of it is parental readiness as well as child readiness. Okay, so is my child ready? We talked about this a little bit already. Physical, intellectual, motivational. So they have to physically be able to do it. They have to intellectually understand the concept of doing it and holding it and getting to the potty on time, and then they have to want to, okay? Some kids want to for the sake of wanting to. Some kids, like I said, are just done with the diapers. They're ready to go. Some children need a lot of motivation, especially 3-year-old boys. Or at least my 3-year-old boy. He didn't care. Okay, so part of this comes down to bladder control, right? So they have to have that awareness, that feeling that we all get when the bladder's full, that we kind of take for granted as adults, right? It's not the easiest concept to grasp. Their brain has to have the ability to override the reflex action of the bladder to contract, okay? The bladder does that automatically. The brain has to be developed enough to the point where it senses it and it has control and it can say, nope, stop, squeeze that muscle. Keep it in until we're ready to go, okay? The ability to actually tighten that external sphincter that keeps the urine in. So that little valve that muscle that you got to squeeze down to keep everything in, they got to actually be able to do that. Oops, sorry about that. Seriously. There we go. Okay, so normal bladder growth. I touched on this a little bit. A 3-year-old bladder can hold about 5 ounces. Okay, if you think about that, that's not that much. These are 9 ounces, so that's about half of one of these. Okay, and so, I mean, obviously some of it depends on how much your child drinks during the day and how good of a drinker they are, but especially if you think about overnight, you start to realize why it's hard for them to hold overnight, okay? And then, like I said, the motivation to stay dry. So physical readiness, they have to be able to walk and run steadily. They have dry periods of up to 3 to 4 hours at a time. So you might notice when you're changing their diapers, you're not having to change their diaper as often, or you may go to change their diaper and they're actually still dry when you think it should be time for them to have a wet diaper. Can pull their pants up and down themselves. Of course, this is simple elastic waistbands. Do not complicate things with snaps and zippers and buttons and things like that, okay? Have well-formed stools at regular times. This one can be tricky. Okay, poop varies so much between kids, and for one kid it can vary a lot during the day as well. But the point is if you have a child, one of the things that's going to complicate things is if you have a child who suffers from constipation and chronic constipation that hasn't been dealt with yet. That is going to make potty training extremely difficult. 1, because it's going to be hard to predict when they're going to go, and 2, because they typically have a lot of pain, and that leads to anxiety and fear. And if they have painful stools when they're on the potty, they're going to associate the potty with pain, and it's just not going to be a good situation. It also makes it harder for them to control their bladder because the rectum, if it gets really distended, it actually pushes up on the bladder and on the urethra where the pee comes out, okay? So that actually can make things harder for them as well. So, but they obviously need to be having well-formed stools too to be able to control that. And then they need to be able to have the ability to hold on for a minute, okay, while they get to the potty. So intellectual readiness. They can sit quietly in one position. Obviously, this doesn't mean for a very long time, okay, but they need to be able to at least do that. Maybe you look at a book. They need to show interest in others' bathroom use. For those of you who have little ones who are mobile and are coming close to this, you may have found they will not let you alone in the bathroom, ever. Ever. Guess what? That doesn't change. I'm sorry. But part of that is because obviously they always want to be with mommy and daddy, but a lot of that is because they're interested in what's going on and they're trying to figure out what's going on, what you're doing, how do you do that, and they're trying to learn by imitation. They give signs of a bowel movement. So some kids will actually flat out come up and tell you, Mommy, I pooped. I pooped in my diaper. I need my diaper changed, things like that. But for other kids, it's the actual behavioral thing that may be verbal, like I said, but they also might. Some children I've seen, before they're even potty trained, they won't poop in front of people. They'll go and they'll squat behind a chair, they'll go squat behind a sofa, or they'll go to their room or what have you. They may make faces or noises or what have you. You know your kids, you start to get the signs of what you doing? I see the look on your face, right? So they're starting to give some of those signs, and signs that you can follow as well as signs that they can follow, okay? They can follow simple instructions like, go to your room, bring me this, go sit on the potty, those kinds of things. They understand putting things where they belong. I know this sounds kind of funny, but part of this concept is learning that pee and poop go in the toilet. It no longer goes in your diaper or in your underwear. So being able to follow directions like go put your ball in the basket, the child knows go clean up your toys. They know all my toys go in this bin. That concept is actually something that you can then transfer to helping to explain to them why we go in the potty, because that's where the pee and the poop belong. Okay. So that's actually an important concept for them. And then has words for urine and stool. Everybody uses different stuff, whatever works for you and your kid and your family, pee pee, poo poo, whatever. We're a 2-dog family, so it's urine and stool and poop. But whatever words they use and whatever works for them, and of course some of that depends on the child's verbal abilities as well. Understanding the physical signs, again, the urge to go, which is, like I said, a more difficult concept than we sometimes understand. Dislikes the feeling of feeling wet or dirty. This is huge. Okay, and this is definitely one of the areas where the girls have it over the boys. Honestly, most of the time you see the girls, obviously exceptions to every rule, but what we see a lot of times is the girls dislike that sensation sooner than the boys, and that's part of the motivation to potty train. For my son, didn't seem to care much at all. Didn't faze him in the least. He finally, though, started to come up to me and tell me when he needed to be changed. And that's when I was like, score, okay, now we can move forward. Because I tried to potty train him several times. And he had the physical ability. He had the intellectual ability. There was no motivation. And using things like stickers worked for about 2 seconds. I started buying toys. I'll admit it. He got a little matchbook car every single time. That only lasted so long. M&Ms, you name it. You name it, we pretty much did it. And so part of it, you can motivate them to a certain extent, and we'll get to that in a little bit using reward systems, but that only goes so far if they have absolutely no desire to actually do it in the first place. That'll only last as long as the novelty of the reward if there isn't other motivation there. Demonstrating the desire for independence, that's also huge. Most 2s and 3s don't have a difficult time with that, but some do. Takes pride in accomplishments. This is huge. The most important motivation, the most important reward you can give your child is making it a big party. Huge. Anytime they sit on the potty, go on the potty, pee, poop, there's clapping, there's cheering, there's you're awesome, go tell daddy what you just did, you're such a big boy, you're such a big girl. Okay, this is huge because that pride and that reward of your encouragement is really one of the most motivating things that you can possibly do for them. And then of course they need to be in a cooperative stage. Challenge for a lot of 2s, 3s, and 4s. But really what that means is you need about a 6 to 12 week block of time, okay, that you know you're going to have minimal interruptions, you're going to have minimal travel, you're going to have minimal major changes in life, routine, those kinds of things, so that you can really kind of focus on this. Okay. Relatively calm time is best, kind of coming back to that concept. Summer, for some families is easier, but like for my family, we moved last summer, we're moving again this summer. That's why I didn't potty train him. When I didn't get him potty trained close to 2.5, because that's when we moved, I was like, we're not doing it now, because he's just going to regress when we move. And he still wasn't doing it. So, and we're moving again this summer, and I was like, I've got to get him potty trained now, because if I wait until the summer, it's going to be chaotic for us. So part of it depends on your family and what's going on with your family and when there's a block of time. We were traveling so much, I finally saw after his 3rd birthday, I had a block of about 4 weeks only that we weren't moving or traveling or doing this or doing that. I was like, okay, that's it. That's when we're doing it. We gotta, right? So that is one of the challenging things, is finding a time that's going to work for you and your child that's going to be as low stress as possible. And it will be harder, like I said, to train during those times, moving, baby, vacation, other changes, okay, in the family or in your stress level. When will you be available? It takes time to develop a routine, okay? You don't have to be a parent who's home all the time to make this work, but you've got to figure out a time frame and a schedule and a routine that's going to work for you, that's going to be consistent to help make this happen. Reasons to delay toilet training, okay? Again, anticipating the birth of another child. Don't do it. Some parents will try to do it, shortly before the other child comes because they want the first child out of diapers. That is great in theory. As soon as the baby comes, they will regress, okay? And you'll have to do it all over again. Moving to a new home, like we said, mother returning back to work, okay, just because that's a change in routine and can be a stressful time. Okay, so doing it well ahead of that or waiting until after you're established in your new routine and then trying it, okay? Too many changes in a child's life can definitely make the toilet training more difficult, increase chance of failure, and increase your stress level. And again, this is one that I know from personal experience because we've had a chaotic year. We're here for my husband's training. We've moved a lot and we've traveled a lot, and trying to find that time that was going to work for my son and was going to work for me and we were going to have enough consistency and waiting for him to be ready for it, it was tricky. It was definitely a challenge. And there were definitely some missteps and some false starts that we did because I kept trying to do it at times that wasn't going to work for him or for me. Okay. When at least one of the ways to assess your readiness, we've talked a lot about the kids' readiness, but again, parental readiness. Again, at least one caregiver can devote the time and emotional energy. I can't stress that one enough, okay? Again, this is one I vastly underestimated until I had to do it myself, okay? To be consistent on a daily basis for a minimum of 3 months. Now, what does that mean? That does not mean you have to be home every day, all day, focusing on nothing but potty training for 3 months, okay? But it does mean you need to have, if at all possible, as consistent a routine as possible, okay? And everyone involved in the care of the child, when at all possible, needs to be on the same page. Okay, so that the child gets the same reinforcement, they get the same schedule. For me, in my husband, I was making sure my husband was on the same page and he knew what the plan was, and we have a daycare and we have a nanny. And so touching base with each of those folks and saying, okay, this is how we're doing it, this is the reward system he's getting, and just trying to get everybody on the same page, or at least to the best that we could, right? And what I did do, I will say, is I took a long weekend that I knew I was going to be home and could focus on nothing but this for about 3 to 4 days straight. And then we went back into our regular routine, okay? That was not a fun weekend. Understanding that accidents are inevitable and punishment, I cannot stress this enough. So understanding that accidents are inevitable and that punishment has absolutely no role in potty training, okay? Punishment has no role. Okay, it is only going to make things worse. It is only going to make your job harder. It is only going to lead to stress, fear, anxiety, and all of those physical problems that we talked about. Okay, toilet training can set the stage for child abuse, like we mentioned before. In those really high intensity times of stress. Okay, unfortunately, things can happen, so keep that in mind. Okay, so how do you start? Preparation. So, show and tell, books, examples, potty talk. I tell parents that while I don't necessarily want you to start potty training at 18 months of age or 15 months of age, if they're showing interest, great, get books, get the Elmo potty movie, get a little potty seat for them to sit on and explore and do all of that. That's great. If they show the interest, take advantage of it, okay? We've got several potty books. We've had several potty chairs. And I introduced that stuff to him at 15 months of age, and like I said, about 36 months is when we finally got there. But that's okay. It's a process, right? Change diapers like a robot. So what does that mean? You do not want the time that you spend changing diapers to be positively reinforcing in any way, shape, or form. You don't want it to be mean, but this is not happy time. This is not special time with mommy, daddy. This is not special attention time. This is, you make it as boring as possible, okay? So that there's absolutely no gain. So if you make changing diapers not fun, not punishment, okay, but boring, and you make sitting on the potty a party and fabulous and special time with mommy or daddy, you're going to see how that motivation, right, is going to swing to, oh, well, I'd much rather do that because that's just way more fun than this boring, lay me on the table, change my diaper, okay? Practice sitting on the potty. Again, if they're interested, great. Get them the little potty. If they prefer to sit on the big potty, great. Get them one of the little potty seats and practice. And the more you practice and the more you let them do that, the more likely you are that they're going to happen to pee or poop while they're sitting on the potty and doing the practice. And then you make such a huge deal out of it, right, that they definitely want to do it again because that was so super cool. Why wouldn't they, right? Okay. Potty chair, one for each floor of your house or even one for each bathroom. You do not want to be running from one bathroom to another to grab the potty seat when your child decides they want to go, right? You want to be set up to do it quickly, easily, as low stress as possible for everybody. Plus, the more potty seats they see around, the more exciting, the more fun, right? Step stool, again, if they're going to be using the big potty, you don't want their legs dangling. Okay, that's not comfortable. And it's actually very hard to physically pee or poop if you want their feet to have support, okay? And you want them to have the seats with the handles where they can hold on because they need to be able to sit in a comfortable position that is conducive to elimination, okay, shall we say. So if they're going to be on the big toilet, that's fine, but you want to make sure you're set up properly for that. Stable lid on toilet. I can't emphasize this one enough either. If you put them on the potty for the first time or you're in the process of doing that and the seat slips, they fall in, or even if they don't fall in, they just get freaked or scared, getting them back on that potty could take an act of God, okay? So you want to make sure that you're set up for success on that regard too. Easy to remove clothing, we talked about this. Elastic waistbands, shorts, pants for boys and girls, but also for the girls, tights or skirts, dresses, what have you, but things that they can manipulate themselves easily. Underwear or pull-ups. I'm going to give you my take on this, okay? Pull-ups are great, sort of, okay? If you really are not sure your kid is really ready to make that next step, but they're showing interest, pull-ups, fine, certainly during nap time and nighttime. But underwear. If it's time to really make this happen and it's time to move forward, underwear. Period, paragraph, end of story. It will be more work for you briefly, but the pull-ups have gotten a little too effective, so they absorb really well. Well, if they absorb well, they can't feel the wetness. They don't have that negative feedback of the sensation that's not comfortable, okay? Underwear and then put their pants on over them, so at least they're not leaking onto the floor, okay? But it will not be pleasant. We don't want to punish, but sometimes natural consequences are the best consequences, right? It's uncomfortable, they don't like it, they get excited about the big boy or big girl underwear, and that can be a real motivating factor too. So pull-ups can work, but it has to work well for your family and for your child. So just be aware of that. Special soap or wipes. What we mean by that is let your kid pick out like the pump soap they're going to get to wash their hands with. Okay, let them pick that out. That'll be fun. That makes washing your hands a fun thing. It makes going to the potty a fun thing. Wipes. If you have the flushable wipes so that they can wipe themselves better, because of course hygiene is definitely difficult, and don't expect for them to be able to wipe themselves effectively for quite some time. Okay, just be aware of that one. Stickers, charts. Okay, this comes back to those reward factors that we were talking about, and this again depends on your kid. Okay, M&Ms, chocolate chips, stickers, stamps, whatever works. Okay, and you may have to try different things, and that's okay. One of the things, actually, one of our behavioralists at Val Verde, who ended up helping me with this because we really were having such a challenge, she told me, she's like, Carrie, it's okay that you have to change up the rewards. When the reward gets boring and it's not motivating, then fine, you change it up. You do something else. And you keep doing that, and you just keep recycling stuff. And we did. We kind of went back and forth. And for little cars for a little while, then it was the M&Ms, and we went back to the cars and then back to the M&Ms. But it was whatever worked for him at the time, and that's okay. Targets. For those of you who have boys, you can get pee-pee targets. You put them in the potty. They aim at them. It works. One of the motivational ones we used for my son was goldfish. Sink the goldfish. Teaches them to aim. But it's also fun, and it's motivating in a positive way. So yes, he will still run up to me and goes, Mommy, let's sink the fish. Okie dokie. Travel seats. Obviously, once you're really to the point where you are moving forward with this, you want to make sure that you know where the potties are when you go out, okay? And you want to have a travel potty with you. Whether it's a little travel seat, there's some that fold up that you can put on like public toilet seats and things like that. There's also actual little potty chairs that completely fold up that they themselves act as a potty, and they come with like little plastic bags and things like that. So it's just, again, whatever works for you, whatever works for your child, etc. But you want to have the potty around all the time. If you slip into the pattern of, okay, well, we're going to be potty trained at home, but when we go out, we're going to put on the pull-up and it's okay for us to go in our pants when we're out. No. When you're ready, you got to commit. You got to commit and you got to stick with it. Otherwise, you're just going to be making things longer and more painful for yourself and for them. It's kind of a confusing mixed message otherwise. Okay, establishing the right preparation, using the right clothing, like we said, dresses, skirts, pants, elastic waistbands, pajama bottoms, shorts, things like that. Don't use clothes that are difficult to manage. We already kind of mentioned this, the overalls, suspenders, snaps, buttons, zippers, onesies, etc. And prepare by example, okay? They need to see what they need to do, okay? There we go. Schedule potty times, okay? So when you're ready to really kind of do this, you want to get them in the right underwear, clothes, what have you, that you're going to use, and then schedule potty times, at least every 2 hours. Now, I will say, when we potty trained my son, we actually ended up starting with every 30 minutes, okay? If you start with every 2 hours and y'all aren't making it to the potty, because the key is you want to set them up for success. The more success they have, the better they're going to feel about themselves, the easier it's going to be, the more motivated they're going to be. It's going to be a positively continuing cycle as opposed to a negative cycle. So if you start with every 2 hours, that's fine. But if you find you're not getting to the potty, back it off. We actually did every 30 minutes, which was oh so fun. And of course meant we couldn't go anywhere for about 24 hours. But it gave us some success, okay? Then we went to 45 minutes, then we went to an hour, then we went to an hour and a half. And somewhere between about an hour and a half and 2 hours, he just kind of took off. And he was fine, and he could do it. But again, it depends on your child. 2 hours may be fine for your child, 1 hour may be fine for your child. That's one where you just kind of have to work it. But starting with at least every 2 hours is at least a good place to start. One thing you can do too is set a timer, okay? Get either a special potty timer, I don't care if it's your kitchen timer, you tell them it's the special potty timer, okay? And you set it, and when the timer goes off, it's potty time, okay? And there's a reward. I typically like to do a reward for sitting, one for peeing, one for pooping. So for example, if you're doing the M&Ms, and I know we don't usually promote candy, but in this situation, okay. Or stickers, we'll use stickers, okay. So they get 1 sticker for sitting. So they at least get a reward for at least sitting. They get 2 stickers for pee, they get 3 stickers for poop, okay. Or whatever works to motivate your child, okay. Those kinds of things. And again, the reward for even just sitting, okay, because that's a big deal. And the more they sit, the more likely they're going to be to do it. Best time to get them on the potty is about 20 minutes after meals, because just naturally your gut, there's actually a reflex where when food hits your stomach, it sends a signal to your gut, move everything along please, we've got more coming down the pipe, okay? So you're going to be most likely to get them to be successful if you do it with about 20 minutes after the meal. And you want to get them to stay on the potty for a while. And that can be easier said than done, okay? But maybe there's a book that they like to read, or you read them a book while they're on the potty. Maybe there's a toy that they only get to play with while they're sitting on the potty. That was actually one of the things that worked for my son. Something that makes it a positive experience, but also gets them to sit for longer so they have a better chance of success. And then, like we said, get excited, stay excited. If you feel like you're being ridiculous, you're probably doing it right, okay? But you really gotta amp it up. And if everybody in the house can amp it up, even better, okay? We want positive reinforcement from everybody. And yeah, did I mention being excited? Yeah, okay. So transition to training pants or cotton underwear. This is, again, one where you'll get a lot of variation, and again, it depends on your kid. General rule of thumb is after at least 1 week of success using the potty and daytime dryness. For us, until I put him in underwear, nada. He was completely not interested. I'd try to get him I'd sit him on the potty. It would work again as long as the reward worked for him. But there was no other motivation because he just really didn't care. We had to take a weekend, decide this is when we're doing it. Once I knew he had all of those readiness factors, and we just I had to make the decision that the diapers were going away. I told him the diapers are going away. We have no more diapers. Mommy's out of diapers. There's no more diapers at the store except for these nighttime diapers, and they only work at night. Okay? These are your big boy underwear. This is what we're doing. Okay? And that was it. We went cold turkey. It was not a fun weekend, but it worked. Again, that's one of those challenging situations though. So know that for your kids, you may just have to adjust some of these for whatever works for you guys. Don't rush them out of diapers, and in general, I do agree with that. Okay, initially when we were doing our process, we did not rush them out of diapers. Should not be forced to wear soiled diapers for extended periods of time or as a form of negative reinforcement, okay, because that comes back to the whole you do not want to punish, okay? Returning, and again though, for some of those kids who don't get that sensation though, or aren't bothered by that sensation, that might be another reason to switch them to underwear sooner, because they might get more of that sensation with the underwear. Again, not as a punishment. You don't want to leave them in it, but just for them to understand, oh, okay, wait, what I'm feeling in my bladder means that if I don't tighten that, this is going to happen, and that's not fun. Okay? Return to diapers if unable to stay dry at this stage. I completely agree. Again, like I said, we had several missteps. There was or false starts, I should say, not missteps, because it was worthwhile to try. But we tried. It didn't work. It caused him frustration. It caused me frustration. It was anxiety-provoking for both of us. So I was like, you know what? We're not doing this right now. And I stopped, put him back in diapers, and didn't push it at all. We waited, and when he wanted to sit on the potty, he could, but we just kind of let it be for a while and then went back to it again. Sticker star chart is positive reinforcement for successful attempts. We've talked about that too. For some, I've heard some parents too talk about, as opposed to giving them something like a little toy or candy every single time, if you do the sticker or star chart, and when they get to a certain number, or when they get to the end of the day, then they get the big prize. That's certainly something that can work. It did not work for my kid, but it might work for your kid. Okay, so that's another way to kind of try to do that reinforcement. Adopt a positive, loving approach to toilet training. This is critical. Again, this has to be positive and not negative. And if you feel like you're getting negative, if you feel like you're getting in a negative cycle, or you feel like it's causing undue stress on your child, it's time to stop. Okay, it's time to stop. Back off, back away, take a break, and come back to it at a later time when you think y'all are both ready. Keep the child, like we said, easy, removable clothing. Avoid battles over toilet training. That is not easy. I will be the first to admit I failed miserably at this, okay? For the most part, we tried to avoid it, but there were definitely times where I was like, just for the love of God, please sit on the potty. And it's very, very hard. So that's one of the things that you really have to try to keep yourself in check on and be aware of yourself and what your limitations are and your readiness is. Avoid flushing the toilet while the child is on it. This is huge, right? Because that can be a big, scary noise. There are also a lot of kids have they're in what we call the magical thinking phase. So they have some really, what we would consider irrational fears. There are kids who think they're going to get sucked down into the toilet, okay? There's kids who think their poop is part of them, and by flushing it down the potty, you're flushing part of them. There's all kinds of thought processes that can be going on in their silly little cute adorable magic thinking heads, okay? So you've got to be aware of that. And that's the other thing too, when a kid if they are really, really fighting you on sitting on the potty, okay, ask them why. And obviously it'll depend on their stage of development how well they can verbalize that. But first of all, you're acknowledging their issue, you're acknowledging that they might be afraid, and you might actually find out something really interesting. One of the times where my son and I were about to just come to it about going to the potty, when we were out and about after he was already potty trained, he was really pushing back, and I finally said, okay, why? And he goes, because it was an automatic flushing toilet. And what turned out, he was scared to death of the noise. And he knew if he got near the potty was going to flush, and it was going to be really loud, and it was going to echo all the way through, and it scared him to death. Oh, okay. And then we could kind of adjust and deal with that fear, and then he was fine. And he did exactly what I wanted him to. But here I was getting mad at him, thinking he was just being obstinate and defiant, when really he was scared to death about this nasty, loud flushing toilet, right? Okay. Avoid over reminders. That can be hard, okay? But, again, you got to look at it as natural consequences. If you remind them and they go, great. If you remind them and they don't go, and they go in their pants, there's the natural consequence. They learn that when mommy reminds me and I don't go, oh, that's not good. Okay. Teach boys to urinate sitting first. Absolutely. Teach them to stand after successful bowel training is complete. Again, this varies a little bit. You've got to figure out what works for your kiddo. But for the most part, I totally agree with that. And I think for the most part, for most boys, that works well. Keeping the stool soft by increasing dietary fiber and reducing dairy products. We talked about the constipation issues. Using training pants as part of the transition from diaper to underwear, not as the first step. Again, for the most part, for most kids, I agree with that. But you may have to make some adjustments for your kid depending on what works for them. Nighttime and nap training should wait until the child is consistently dry during the day. I absolutely agree. And really what that comes down to is as long as you limit their fluid intake before sleep, that will come on its own. And after they've been dry for several days, naps, or several nights in a row, then great, you try it. Okay, but you also reassure them that if they do have an accident, it's okay. Okay? Children should be reminded to void upon wakening to avoid accidents. So kind of the rule I like is before you go to bed, as soon as you get up, if you're getting ready to leave the house, okay? And then other than that throughout the day as you feel is necessary or appropriate for your child. Okay. Keep it calm and scheduled like we talked about. Talk through the fears, okay? My poop is a part of me. Fear can lead to withholding and hiding, like we've talked about. Keep the stool soft, like we said. Constipation is definitely your enemy. Really neat behavioralist that I got to go to a lecture on with the AAP talked about the poo-poo party. Okay, there's a party underneath the house. All the poo-poo gets to go to the poo-poo party. Mom's poop goes to the poo-poo party. Dad's poop goes to the poo-poo party. Sister's poop goes to the poo-poo party. But the only way to the poo-poo party is through the toilet. So if you don't put your poop in the poo-poo party, in the toilet, your poo-poo doesn't get to go to the poo-poo party. And your poo-poo's sad. And it's amazing how well it worked for a lot of her patients. And she had another doctor who told her he added to, like when they started getting cramping from constipation or what have you, he'd tell them that was the poo-poo knocking on their tummy to tell them he wants to go to the poo-poo party. Nice. It works for them. That lovely magical thinking. Okay, limit fluids after dinner, okay, because of their bladder capacity, like we said. Empty their bladder before bed, and like we said, bedwetting is definitely normal for quite some time. Recognize a family pattern, because like I said, bedwetting does run in the family. So if mom or dad or grandparents, aunts, uncles, what have you, have had issues with bedwetting throughout their life, there is a good chance that the child will too, and that's okay. And that's one of the biggest things to let them know is that it's okay, because it can definitely cause a lot of anxiety for those kids and self-esteem issues as well. And then bedwetting alarms is certainly, if it's something that's going on longer than you think it should or it's causing a lot of problems for the child, they can't go to sleepovers, things like that, there's definitely bedwetting alarms, and there's different ways of doing that. There's simply setting an alarm so that they wake up, once or twice throughout the night to go potty. There's also alarms that actually are part of the underwear or go in the underwear that sense wetness and wake them up, go off and wake them up when they have wetness. For the most part, though, I'll say that most kids are going to grow out of it, okay? So if you can do the good nights or those kinds of underwear and you can just reassure and reassure and reassure to help avoid some of the self-esteem issues and let them know that they will grow out of it, most kids are going to do just fine. If it is an issue, definitely see your pediatrician. There are medications that we can sometimes use or other tips and tricks that we can use. So if it's becoming a problem for you or your family, definitely see your pediatrician about it. Okay, starting too early, we talked about common pitfalls here. Not preparing, so just throwing them on the potty, they ain't gonna work, okay? Pressuring too much certainly is not gonna work. Frustration on either side of the fence. Bribes and punishment. Okay, little note about bribes versus positive reinforcement. Okay, it is not a bribe to give a reward for positive behavior. Okay, a bribe is when you give something to somebody to instigate bad behavior or behavior that's not appropriate. Okay, it is perfectly fine to reward your child. Okay, but punishment is definitely not okay. Okay, what to expect? Wet pants, messes, possibly tears on everybody's part. And setbacks, absolutely. Okay. My son hadn't had an accident in probably about a month, and he had one yesterday. Big deal, okay? We give it over it, we move on. Okay, stay calm, easier said than done, okay, but very important. Stay positive, sometimes also easier said than done, but also extremely positive, important. Give your child responsibility. Okay, when you think they're ready, I need to go potty. Okay, great, go ahead. Call mommy if you need me, okay? Or stand right outside the door, so if you for safety reasons, if you think you need to, but let them do as much as possible, because that sense of self-accomplishment, self-esteem, etc., they love it, okay? And it'll certainly help promote things. Give your child a choice, okay? So what does that mean? That can mean a few different things. Do you want to wear the pull-ups? Do you want to wear the underwear? Which underwear do you want to wear? I actually finally figured out I needed to stop forcing him to sit on the potty when he told me he didn't need to go. I had to give him a choice. Okay, great. And then if he did go in his pants, then great. That was the reinforcement. That was the consequence. And he learned. May need cooling off period of diapers. I completely agree. Been there, done that. Big fan of it. If it happens, don't worry about it. Take a break and start back over when you think y'all are both ready. Problems, toilet refusal, usually achieving bladder control and having regular bowel movements in their pants or diaper, refusing to use the toilet. So basically they can pee fine. It's the refusing to poop in the toilet. Very, 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 very common. Okay, very common. About 20% of normal children have this problem, and I would actually argue more than that from what I've seen in my clinic. Okay, again, you don't push it, but a lot of times if you really pay attention, your kid has regular bowel movement times. So if you can try to preemptively get them on the potty around that time or shortly before that time, so you increase the success and the possibility of them going in the potty, yay! Okay, that'll be real helpful. Possible factors, like we said, attempting to toilet train too early, excessive parent-child conflict, and irrational fears or anxieties about the toilet training. So that's the other issue, is to talk to them about why that is. Because the likelihood is there's some sort of fear or anxiety that's preventing them from going in the potty that you can actually deal with easier than you would think. Hard, painful stools, like we said, from chronic constipation are a big issue. Difficult temperament? Yes, that can be a problem. More negative in mood and less adaptable can be a challenge. And there are, different kids have different temperaments, as do different parents, okay? So sometimes that can come into play. Trying to exert independence or control in a power struggle with the parents, that certainly can be an issue. And if that's the case, or if you feel like that's going on, returning control of the potty training process to the child is important. So fine, okay, if you don't want to poop on the potty, you don't have to poop on the potty. You make it a non-issue, okay? But then when they do, you reward and you praise and you make it something they want to do again. Okay. Helpful suggestions. Again, do not punish or nag. If you're having issues, like we said, feel free to discontinue for a few months and try again. Encourage them to imitate parents or siblings and continue discussing using the toilet training books or videos. Some other suggestions, encourage them to change his or her diapers. One of the things we actually did was encourage him to not only change his own, but when he had a mess, he helped clean up. Wasn't punishment. I didn't make a big deal. We didn't get mad at him. It was just natural consequence. Okay, well, that's fine. But when we have an accident, then we have to clean up our accident and we have to clean ourselves up, right? Well, after a while, that's not fun. And that just kind of helps reinforce. Treat hard stools or constipation, like we talked about. Offer positive feedback, and refer to mental health specialists. May be necessary for children who are over 4 years of age. They really should be potty trained, or at least daytime potty trained, by 4 years of age. I would actually argue too, our behavioral health, we have behavioral health specialists at several of our clinics, okay? They are awesome. Do not hesitate to make an appointment with them, to ask their advice, anything like that. With my son, like I said, I just kind of curbsided one of our behavioralists, Dr. Burt, and I said, okay, I give up. What do I do? And she sat down with me and she helped me figure out a plan that was going to work for me and my son. And when we finally sat down and did it, it was very successful and we were good to go. So I wish I'd talked to her sooner. I also call her the kid whisperer. She's just amazing. So know that that resource is there, okay? ABCs of potty training. Assess your child's readiness, buy the right equipment, create a routine, demonstrate, explain the process, okay? Foster the habit, so do it over and over and over again. Grab some training pants. This can also be very motivational, because characters and all kinds of fun things they love, right? Handle the setbacks gracefully as best you can. Introduce the night training after you've been doing this for a while, and then jump for joy, you're done. Okay, and then these are just a few references of books, both for kids, okay, as well as for y'all. There's some really fun ones, some fun names. Everyone Poops is one of my faves. just because it says everyone poops. Okay. So, and there's a few more on there. There's also some specifically for it hurts when I poop. So kids who are having chronic constipation issues and things like that. So I'll leave those up. And that, I'm sorry, that went a little bit longer than I expected, but definitely, thank you. Definitely happy to answer questions. So go for it. Yes.
Big changes. So my daughter's 22 months. She'll be 2 in July. In December, right now, if everything goes well, we are expecting another baby. So,
hey, congratulations.
Do we try? And she shows a lot of interest. She has a potty. When I go to the bathroom, she comes up and she opens my legs and she says, "Wow."
Yep. Great.
She asks to sit on the potty all the time. When
sure.
She goes. She loves taking her diaper off and going naked. And when she's naked, she doesn't have an accident. She waits till she's got a diaper on to go. So she seems to be like she's,
sure.
gearing up to be ready.
Sure.
Should I push it like when she starts hitting that 2 before the new baby comes? And then
sure.
she'll have 6 months to kind of be in the habit, or should I wait till after the baby comes?
That's a very good question. Oops, sorry. And that's one that, frankly, you're not going to be able to answer until you're there. Okay? That's a kid who might be fine potty training before 27 months, okay? She's showing that much interest, she's showing that much control, she's got the verbal skills, and you have something coming up that you know is going to be an issue. So basically what I would say about that one is see where she's at, okay? This sounds like a kid, you may be that lucky one whose daughter comes into her at 24 months of age and says, "Mommy, I'm done with my diapers." And you're like, fantastic, okay. Encourage whatever she's doing naturally, encourage it. Don't force the issue, but if she wants to sit on the potty, great, sit on the potty. If she starts being dry in her diapers all the time and you want to try underwear, great, go for it. But I wouldn't push it. I certainly wouldn't push it before 2, and I still wouldn't force it before about 27 months of age. That is going to be, you're kind of in a tricky spot like we were as far as the timing was concerned too. And what I would argue is basically, I would say if you get within 3 months of the baby being born and she's not there, don't. But if she's there and she's doing it, take advantage. Cool? Yes, ma'am.
Our daughter, she's only 19 months, but she goes to daycare and she sees the other kids using the potty, and so she's really, really interested. We got her a potty, and we've been encouraging her to try it, but she seems more interested in the big potty. Like, she wants to climb on that. She almost doesn't care about her potty.
My son never, he liked to take the potty chair apart.
Yeah, that's what she does.
Yeah. He never went on it, ever.
So do I just get a step stool and one of those?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If that's what she's interested in, sure. And again, just because you get her the potty chair at 18 months of age, don't expect her to be potty trained by 2, okay? But if she's interested, absolutely. Get her the little potty seat, get her the step stool, let her sit on the potty. If she happens to go, great. Huge party, and go ahead and start laying the groundwork. Absolutely.
We have a question from Twitter.
Yes, ma'am.
A 4.5-year-old son refuses to poop on the toilet.
Okay.
Fully potty trained except for the poop.
Okay.
What suggestions?
Well, to a certain extent, it kind of depends on how long he's been potty trained. If this is a child who just recently reached urinary continence, then that still may be within the realm of norm for that child. If this is a kid has had urinary continence for since he was 3 or 3.5, then we're pushing it. But honestly, I think by 4.5, you're kind of pushing it regardless. So that's a kid that it suggests to me that there might be some fears there or some anxiety. So, and at 4.5, he hopefully has the verbal skills to even if he can't tell you, the in-depth workings of his mind, he can at least give you an idea as to what it is he's concerned about or scared about. And if that's not working or if that's not making it obvious, then I would make an appointment to see one of the mental health providers, one of the behavioralists, because again, their tips and tricks are beyond what I can even offer you. And sometimes there's things going on there that they can figure out talking to the child or playing with the child and things like that maybe the child hasn't even figured out how to verbalize yet. So.
One more question.
Yes,
what suggestions do you have for when children save their BMs for nap or bedtime? Mm-hmm. How can you change that behavior? How can you keep them from playing in it, those sorts of things?
Yes. Real quick before I get back to that, back to the other one too, I'd also make an appointment with the pediatrician because that's also a kid who may be suffering from chronic constipation. Okay, so I would make an appointment with the pediatrician to determine that there's no medical or physical issue going on, and then let the pediatrician also help you get the appointment with, if there isn't a physical issue, with the behavioralist to address possible behavioral issues. Okay, going back to so this one was, how do you get them to stop saving it, right? And how do you keep them from playing in it? That's a fun one, isn't it? So keeping them from saving it, again, it comes back to not pushing too hard. Okay, certainly do not punish them for going in their diaper during nap time or during nighttime. They do typically come out of that one on their own for the most part, but again, it's setting them up to go during regular awake time. So if there is a pattern to when they're going, like they poop during their nap, then great, put them on the potty before nap time. Give them a special toy or a book or something that keeps them occupied on the potty, and let them know what the reward is for pooping on the potty. You don't want to punish them for not, but you want to make sure there's good motivation for pooping on the potty. Okay, and then it also comes back to trying to find out why aren't they pooping on the potty. Okay, so if you have a child who's verbal enough who can say, well, why do you poop in your potty? You pee in the potty really, really well. Why aren't we pooping in the potty? You know, and they may say, they may not know. They may go, I don't know. They may not, but they also may tell you something like, well, it hurts when I go poo-poo. Well, okay. Or they may be a kid who doesn't want to sit there for that long. Well, if that's the case, then you need to give them a reason to sit there for that long, the special toy, the book, what have you. And again, if it goes on for a prolonged period of time or you're becoming concerned about it, then again, I'd make an appointment with the pediatrician, because again, that can be a kid who's dealing with some constipation issues or things like that. And I'd tell them the story about the poo-poo party. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
How do you deal with kids who don't like to go in public?
Oh, that's a good one, because that's a lot of kids. And that's not just in potty training. I deal with teenagers a lot who get urinary tract infections, chronic constipation, all the rest of it, because they don't want to go to the bathroom in public. And again, depending on the verbal skills of the child, having a conversation, it's never a bad thing to have a conversation with your child and ask them questions. They may or may not be able to tell you, but they'll also often tell you some really interesting stuff. Really? I didn't think about that. Okay. Oops, sorry. So part of it is talking to your child about it if they have those verbal skills. But the other thing is when you go out with them, you go and you bring them with you. Okay? So they can see there's nothing scary about sitting on the potty. It's okay. It's not going to hurt you. Okay? If you're on one of those, for a lot of them, it's the automatic flush toilets. Okay? Those dang evil automatic flush toilets. If it happens to flush while you're on it, good, because then you can be like, oh, no big deal, blah, 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 okay, whoo, whoopsie, okay, make a totally not big deal out of it, okay, to help alleviate their fears, because they look to you for how to react to things, what to be afraid of, what not to be afraid of, all of that, okay? So, again, demonstrating, alleviating their fears, trying to figure out what their fears are if they have them. If it is those stupid automatic flush toilets, sometimes what you can do is put like a paper towel, okay, or something over the sensor so it doesn't sense them coming up and down, okay? And then you get them off the potty and away from it, and then you take it off, okay, and let it flush, okay? But if you're really, the best thing, because they're going to come in contact with that kind of stuff all the time, is just trying to help alleviate their fears of those massive toilets that look like they're going to fall in and get sucked away and scary noises.
We also have a question from our Mamaha blog. And by the way, a suggestion from one of the moms that is on the chat with us. Please. She said she carries Post-it notes with her and puts them over the little automatic sensor. I thought that was a great idea.
Oh, that's awesome.
So,
yay.
Yay, Mom. But Jen from our blog chat is wondering if there are special potty training pants that she can buy.
In what way? I mean, like training pant underwear, or
just anything, like not necessarily a pull-up, but
yes,
maybe a step before.
Yeah, like somewhere
underwear.
Between regular underwear and an actual disposable pull-up. Yes, right. There are cloth pull-ups, if you will, or cloth training pants. I've actually found some at Target before where they're cloth, but they have a little bit thicker lining in the middle so that it doesn't just spill all down the leg. You can also oftentimes find them online if you Google cloth training pants, okay, or cloth potty training pants, those will come up. Yes, ma'am.
Actually, to answer that, there's a website, it's called Potty Scotty for boys, and for girls it's Potty Patty.
Cool.
And they have the cloth training pants.
Great. So for those of you who might not have heard, Potty Scotty and Potty Patty are 2 websites for boys and girls respectively to find such items. Fantastic. Thank you. I didn't know that. Yes, ma'am.
We are expecting a baby in August, and our son will be 3 in November. So we're right at that critical. He sat on the potty. He takes my phone, my iPhone, and
Yes.
he sit on the potty.
Yes.
And for a while there, we did really great.
Yes.
I mean, we would even poo-poo on the potty.
Rock on.
Now, nothing. No interest in it. And I'm like, okay,
Yep.
fine, go in your diaper.
Yep.
You know, I don't care. You
Perfect.
know, do whatever you want.
Perfect.
Do we wait? Do we try? What do we do?
Good question. Again, I feel your pain. And I didn't promote the iPhone before, but sometimes that's a really good thing to keep them on the potty for a long time. I'm just going to say that. Okay. Yay, Angry Birds. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's how we did it. I'm just not promoting screen time. Okay? Not promoting screen time. Okay. So, got to do what you got to do, man. So for him, I think you're doing exactly the right thing. He stopped being interested. You're letting it go. You know you're still on the early side. You know you have this other stressor coming up, okay? May, June, if he all of a sudden is like, I want to be on the potty again, and he's really excited about it, then great. Go for it. Otherwise, I probably would wait until after the baby comes. Because you said his 3rd birthday is not until November. You're golden. You've got time. So right now is not the time. If he was already 3, I'd say, okay, pick a time you can do it and do it now, okay? But he's not even 3 yet, and he's a boy, right? Okay. So, I mean, if he shows the motivation, again, take advantage of the motivation. But if he's not there, you're just going to cause yourself stress. And even if you do get him there, you're asking for him to regress when the baby comes. Yes, ma'am.
With multiples, I'm trying to decide right now, because it seems like a lot of work. If I could just do one at a time or both, because they seem to be distracted by each other. And
Right. Boys, girls, both?
girls.
Okay.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so yes, I'm sorry. So we've got a mom of multiples. God bless you. And trying to decide whether or not to, trying to decide whether or not to potty train both kids at the same time versus one at a time. And please, if there are any moms out there of multiples on our tweet feed or in the audience, do please feel free to chime in, okay? Because I do think it's a challenging topic. Most of what the advice I've heard colleagues got, I've read about, and I've given myself, is to do them at the same time, because they're going to be used to doing things together. If you start potty training one of them, the other one will likely want to do it. And so to kind of do it all together at once is usually the conventional wisdom. I will, with that said though, again, every kid's different, right? And even with twins, right, you've got different temperaments and you may have different levels of readiness too. So for the most part, I'd say the general recommendation is to potty train them at the same time. But if you don't think that's going to work for your kids, or you don't think that's going to work for you, then do what you feel is going to work for you. If you've got one kiddo that's ready to go, ready and raring to go, and the other one's not, then great. Start potty training the one that's motivated, and that in and of itself will motivate the other one, because the other one will want to do what sister's doing, right? So that's what I would say about that one. Yes, ma'am.
How do you coordinate with daycare? Like, what is reasonable to ask of them?
Good question. Mom wants to know, how do you coordinate with daycare? A lot of that depends on your daycare, okay? I was really I have an in-home daycare, and my son's the youngest one there, so he was the only one that wasn't potty trained yet. So it was really nice because he had a lot of peer pressure, positive peer pressure, to go in the potty, and a lot of other kids who were doing it. When you're in a kind of a more conventional daycare setting, that can actually be a really good thing too, though, because they're often potty training them, and they're all potty training together, and the staff have potty trained hundreds of children, whereas you haven't potty trained one, right? And so, you know, that can actually be really, really helpful, because again, it's that imitating, it's the positive peer pressure, and it's that guidance. So one of the things I would start off with is, instead of, you know, going into your daycare and saying, this is how we're doing it, ask them how they're doing it. Because one, they probably have some good tips for you. But two, then you're also coming to them, as opposed to being like, this is how I want my child potty trained. Okay, you're going in a more positive way. And then if If that sounds like what they're doing is going to work well and be very consistent with what you're doing, great. If it's not, decide why not. Is it because you need to change something you're doing, or do you need to request of them to do something a little different for your child, and then make the request? Worst they're going to say is no, or well, no, because we need to do it this way. And if that's the case, then you just decide, okay, how am I going to make that as consistent as possible with what I'm doing at home so that he or she has that consistency. But daycares are usually pretty good at potty training kids, honestly. So I would ask them what they're doing and kind of try to go along. Yes. Anyone?
What do you do if your child won't give up their sippy cup and it's making potty training difficult?
Interesting. So won't give it up like at night, I'm guessing, maybe?
It says my 2-year-old won't give up his cuppy, which is making potty training hard. What suggestions do you have?
Okay, without being able to clarify that with that parent too much, what I would say is, on the one hand, using the sippy cup during the day actually often makes potty training easier because you want to be getting fluid into them so that you have a higher rate of success and a higher rate of having opportunity to sit on the potty and go. I'm guessing, and I hope I'm not guessing incorrectly, that they're probably talking about for nighttime wetness or nap time wetness. And if that's the case, again, it kind of depends. You get to the point where if you think they should be dry at night, they've been dry during the day for a long time, and they're consuming too much liquid at night, and that's the problem, then you make a rule. Say, okay, after dinner, we get no drinks, or we get 1 drink, or we get this much, or whatever you think is going to work for your child. Say, this is what you're getting, and then we're done. Sippy goes away, and we're done until morning. It won't be easy. They will not be pleased. And it'll probably take about 3 to 4 nights of doing it consistently without caving no matter what for them to get that this is the new rule and it is not going to change, and then they will give it up. But again, that's one of those things where if you feel like you need to go to that, if you feel like you need to do that, pick 3-4 days in a row where you know your stress level is lower, you know you can stick to it, you know whoever else is in the house can stick to it, okay? And you make the rule, you say you're going to do it, you tell them what's going to happen, and you do it. Anybody else? It's about 7:15, by the way, for anybody who needs to. I understand if you need to go and get with babysitters. Yes?
I am going to be getting custody of my nephews that are 20 months, and the oldest is almost 3.
Okay.
They've been bounced around a lot in the past 6 months.
Right. Right.
The oldest has had some training.
Okay.
I don't know how much.
Okay.
I'm not going to push training until he's comfortable.
Absolutely.
Is there a time frame that I should say, okay, once he's been with us a month or 2 months, or should I just judge how he is?
I would just judge based on him, because so much of it, one, it's kid dependent and temperament dependent. It's also dependent on what he's gone through in his past and how much he's been juggled around. You know, a kid who's moved once, might not take him that long to adjust. A kid who's been juggled around quite a bit, you know, to get the security that this is where I'm staying, I'm not going anywhere, I'm comfortable here, I'm safe here, I don't have to have that anxiety anymore, those kinds of things, because you don't want to add to the anxiety of a new environment, right, by doing this. And even if he is 3 or creeping up on 3, there's extenuating circumstances. So, I mean, if he gets to your house and he's like, where's the potty? Then yeah, great, take advantage of it. But with both of them, I would just follow his lead. Follow his lead and wait until you feel like he is comfortable, confident, secure in his surroundings before you even come close to addressing that. Absolutely.
They've been in like 7 different homes in the past 6 months, and then we're gonna make like number 8. And we're guessing that it's gonna be a long-term thing.
Right.
You know, officially it's billed as temporary custody, but they're in foster care right now.
Sure.
And it's, you know, they bounce and bounce and bounce.
Well, and kids who are in that kind of situation where they're already in a high anxiety, high stress situation, they're at particularly increased risk of developing encoparesis and enuresis long term. Okay, so I would not do anything that might increase the chance of that happening because he doesn't need that, neither do you. So yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Bueller? Yes, sir.
Thanks for going a little bit extra longer. You did a great job.
No problem. My pleasure. I'm sorry the slides went longer than I meant to. No problem. Anyone else? Alrighty. Good deal. Well, thanks guys for coming. I appreciate it. And worst comes to worst, call your pediatricians. This is what we do. Okay? Good luck.